Hello, and welcome to this 58th episode of Questioning Woke Psychotherapy. I'm Michael Dwan-Herrick, and I'm a psychotherapist and life coach in private practice in London. For the past year, I've been, you guessed it, questioning woke psychotherapy on this channel. Critical social justice ideology has increasingly impacted the field in negative ways and come to dominate its training programs and professional bodies. Many of us are concerned about this and are speaking out about it. In this video, I want to share a recent victory in the battle against the woke orthodoxy that has taken over the field. This is something well worth knowing about and celebrating. Before getting into it, I want to acknowledge the current broader context of this good news. While what is happening in the field of psychotherapy is important, it's but one expression of what's happening in the culture at large. Currently, in the UK, the right to free speech and free expression is under attack. There's no written constitution or First Amendment here, so this fundamental right has been on shaky ground all along. But now it seems in great peril of eroding altogether. With the riots in the UK over the past couple of weeks, the government and police force are now taking draconian measures to control speech and expression. Police are scouring social media for any possible offenders. You can now be arrested and thrown in jail for electronic communications on Facebook, Instagram, X, other social media platforms, and even in your personal emails. So-called offenses go far beyond inciting violence, and they include anything that could be deemed as hate speech or offensive, or even only potentially provoke others to violence. Simply posting videos of riots is now against the law, as is just passively observing riots, which can also get you arrested. There's a talk of extraditing Elon Musk for expressing his opinion on X. Do we have to keep saying, formerly Twitter, that the UK is in a civil war? London Metropolitan Police Commissioner Mark Rowley, in responding to a question about anyone egging on the violence from afar, has said, quote, "We will throw the full force of the law at people, and whether you're in this country committing crimes on the streets or committing crimes from further afield online, we will come after you." That's what he said. This means extraditing Musk or any U.S. citizens who are deemed to stir up anything with online posts, even if they're not incitements to violence. Who gets to decide such vague criteria? By the way, I agree that incitements to violence should be prosecuted, but not this other nonsense. I find myself wondering what the government and the police will do in response to misinformation and provocative or offensive language broadcast by the mainstream media and individual citizens against unprotected groups like the white working class in the UK. This group is routinely called far-right racist thugs simply for objecting to mass and illegal immigration. Anti-racist protests and the likes of Antifa are also known to perpetrate violence based on such speech. If there is no two-tier system, as Keir Starmer states, then these instances should come under the same scrutiny and prosecution. I don't think this is the way we should go, but given the current law and its enforcement, it would at least be fair. And just the other day, although not in the UK, Olympic gold medalist in women's boxing, Emaine Khelef, has filed a lawsuit with the French authorities. He's alleging cyberbullying against Elon Musk, J.K. Rowling, and Donald Trump for comments they've made on social media expressing their opinions that men cannot become women and should not be allowed to compete against women in sports. I doubt that this will be successful, but in the current climate, it's hard to be certain. I'm describing this current climate around free speech because I think it highlights the importance of the victory against woke ideology that I'll share in a moment. It's a real cause for celebration, maybe even hope. There's been an escalation of threats to free speech based on a subjective definition of hate speech, which extends far beyond any incitements to violence. In the UK, we now can be visited by the police and get a citation for what's called non-crime hate incidents, yet something good has happened. Now let's get into what that is. For those of you who don't know about James Esses, a brief telling of his story will help you to appreciate this recent victory. Esses is a British man who was enrolled in a training program in integrative psychotherapy at the Metanoia Institute in London. In the course of his training, he disagreed with the teaching of gender ideology and the assertion that people can change their sex. He was particularly concerned about how this leads to gender-affirming care for children. When he spoke out about this, he was expelled from the program. Rather than just walk away and accept the loss, he decided to fight back. He brought lawsuits against both the UKCP, a psychotherapy regulatory and accrediting body in the UK, and Metanoia. First, he won his case against the UKCP. This case was successful based on the 2010 Equality Act, which protects gender-critical beliefs under law. Following his victory, the UKCP made a public statement affirming that therapists have the right to hold and express gender-critical views and that exploratory therapy is not conversion therapy. Having lost the case and making their public statement, the UKCP then subsequently withdrew its signature from the Memorandum of Understanding. This is an agreement signed by all professional bodies of psychotherapy in the UK against conversion therapy. However, the MOU does not make clear that exploratory therapy is not conversion therapy. The withdrawal of the UKCP's signature from the MOU resulted in trans activists within UKCP starting a petition to remove the board. This was then put to a vote of members, and the result was that 79% voted to retain the board. This was Esses' first victory. The most recent victory, announced just a couple days ago, is his successful lawsuit against the Metanoia Institute that had expelled him from their program for expressing gender-critical views. As in his lawsuit against UKCP, his victory hinged upon the 2010 Equality Act. After losing their case, Metanoia put out a statement, which I'll now read. But first, if you're liking this video so far, please remember to give it a like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with a friend. Thanks. Okay. Now, Metanoia's public statement. Quote, "We are pleased to announce that we have reached settlement in the employment tribunal claim brought by James Esses against us. Metanoia recognizes that gender-critical beliefs are protected under the Equality Act 2010. These are the beliefs that sex is binary, immutable, and biological and is fundamentally important. Whilst Metanoia specializes in professional training for those working in adult and not child psychotherapy, it accepts as a matter of general principle the validity of the professional belief that children with gender dysphoria should be treated with exploratory therapy rather than being affirmed toward medical intervention. Discrimination against students because of these beliefs is unlawful. Metanoia also acknowledges the changing policy landscape in this field, including the significant UKCP withdrawal from the 2017 Memorandum of Understanding on Conversion Therapy on child safeguarding grounds, as well as the outcome of the CAS review. We accept that Mr. Esses' advocacy on this subject matter was motivated by a desire to protect children. We also recognize the importance of freedom of speech within educational institutions and the steps taken by the government in this regard, including the recent introduction of the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act 2023. We accept that in our treatment of Mr. Esses, we were in breach of our own policies when we summarily and without due process expelled him from his master's course in integrative psychotherapy. Mr. Esses was not afforded a hearing or an internal appeal. We also apologize for publicizing Mr. Esses' expulsion on social media and in other communications. We accept that the Institute's public comment on social media contributed to Mr. Esses receiving online abuse from third parties, which we condemn. As a consequence of his expulsion, Mr. Esses was barred from the opportunity of completing the additional 2 years of his studies and receiving his qualification with the Institute. Mr. Esses passed every assessment undertaken, which had been marked, had received positive feedback from his clinical placement, and at the time of his expulsion had been signed off to set up in private practice by his supervisor, clinical placement, and personal tutor. We apologize to him for the impact of his expulsion, both professional and personal. Notwithstanding the fact that high-quality therapy is rooted in empathy, active listening, and unconditional positive regard, we did not fulfill these values in our treatment of Mr. Esses. For this, we apologize fully. We will seek to learn the lessons from this ordeal to ensure that this never happens to another student within our institute, and have already taken significant steps so as to improve quality in decision making. We acknowledge the hurt that it has caused to Mr. Esses and wish him well for the future, the end of the quotation. If you'd like to read the statement from Metanoia yourself, you can find a link to it in the description. So, this is great news. It's worth knowing, however, that the Equality Act of 2010 is a qualified right. There are reasons why it might not be upheld. Here are just 3 of the 6 reasons: national security, public safety, or territorial integrity. Restrictions may be necessary to protect these interests. Number 2, prevention of disorder or crime, to prevent speech that may incite violence, crime, or public disorder. 3, protection of health or morals. Restrictions may apply to speech that could harm public health or morality. While most of the restrictions make sense to me, I can't make sense of a restriction that could cause harm to public morality. Whose morality? Would this apply to pride parades for those who believe that homosexuality is immoral? I doubt it. And then there is the Section 127 of the Communications Act of 2003. This makes it a criminal offense to send through a public electronic communications network a message that is grossly offensive, indecent, obscene, or menacing, causing annoyance, inconvenience, or needless anxiety to another is also a criminal offense. Almost every word of this is vague and open to subjective interpretation. Literally, almost anything could be characterized in one of these ways. Fortunately, the Equality Act of 2010 trumps Section 127 of the Communications Act as it comes from the European Commission for Human Rights, or the EHCR. This has allowed James Esses to have his victories with UKCP and Metanoia, but the legal reality is a bit slippery. The Equality Act confers qualified rights, some of which could be very broadly interpreted, for instance, moral harm. And because Section 127 is full of fluffy words, it seems to me that there is a gaping hole in our right to freedom of expression. It just depends on who's in power and what their agenda is. I'm not a legal expert, but this is how it looks to me. Were the creators of these documents just plain stupid, or is it a deliberate authoritarian scheme? What do you think? I celebrate this recent victory against the capture of psychotherapy by critical social justice ideology. It even gives me a flicker of hope about the future. At the same time, to be honest, I see it as analogous to the surgical removal of a part of cancer. This may extend life, but the metastasis has spread and will ultimately take the life of its host. I believe that the field needs to create new and explicitly cancer-free organizations and associations. This means free of social justice ideology and activism. It needs to differentiate itself from identity practitioners or those primarily focused on group identity markers and social activism. I believe the general public, when seeking psychological and emotional help, will choose therapists over identity practitioners when they're more aware of the difference and have the choice. As always, if you've stuck with me until now, thanks. I appreciate your attention. That's all I have to say for now. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other, and remember to celebrate your own victories, no matter how large or small. Bye for now.